I was driving down a deserted road in the middle of the night, on those long truck trips that seemed to never end. The only thing that accompanied me was the sound of the engine and the light of the stars that barely illuminated the path. Most of the roads I travel on are empty, but this one seemed even more desolate. I was starting to feel a little lost, not physically, but more mentally, you know? And it was at that moment that something happened. I was about to take a break to rest when the radio, which I always left on, started crackling. It wasn't a song or a normal radio conversation. The voice that came out was muffled, almost as if it had been recorded on an old tape. At first, I thought it was just interference, but the voice started talking directly to me. She said, "You're close. The station is just ahead, stay alert." I didn't quite understand what that meant, but the feeling of something wrong hit me right there. That voice, strange and muffled, never left my head. I looked out the window, trying to see something in the distance. Suddenly, a light on the horizon caught my attention. It was a small dot, but it stood out against the darkness of the road. My curiosity was stronger than my tiredness, and I decided to follow the direction of that light. When I got close, I realized it was a gas station. Strange, I didn't remember seeing any gas stations on that part of the road. And the most bizarre thing, the place was all lit up, but there were no cars or people there. I stopped the truck and stood there for a while, looking at that gas station that seemed completely deserted. The feeling in the air was thick, as if the entire thing was an illusion. The flickering lights and absolute silence sent a shiver down my spine. Everything was so normal, but at the same time, so wrong. As if it was a place that existed but didn't belong to any real place. I decided to get out of the truck, as strange as it was. I needed to see what was going on. I walked to the station door, and the only thing that told me that this wasn't normal was the fact that the door was open, but no one was there to welcome me. With each step I took towards the station, the silence seemed to grow thicker, more oppressive. The light from the lamps was strong, almost irritating, but the feeling was that everything there was frozen in time. When I entered, the smell of gasoline and rubber filled the room, but there was something more, something undefined. It was as if the air was permeated with a strange energy, something I couldn't describe, but which was making me even more tense. I looked around. The shelves were full of products, but they were all covered in a fine layer of dust, as if no one had touched them in weeks, or maybe even months. At the counter, the cash register was on, but the screen was off, as if it was waiting for something. And the worst part, the radio was on, but there was no sound. It was a low, constant hum, as if the electricity in the place was alive, but it didn't really stop. I felt a chill realizing that this place was working, but with no one to manage it. I decided to explore a little more, and as I turned into the hallway that led to the bathrooms, I heard a noise. It wasn't a loud sound, but like the echo of light footsteps, almost as if someone was moving inside. I froze. I looked around, but I didn't see anyone. The hallway was empty, only the flickering light reflecting off the dirty walls. I had the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. I took a deep breath, trying to get the absurd idea out of my head, and headed to the bathrooms. The door was ajar, which made me hesitate, but my curiosity was stronger. I pushed the door slowly, and when I entered, the smell inside was even stronger. Something was out of place. The sink was full of water, but it wasn't normal water. It was cloudy, almost a dark color, like it was mixed with something. I don't know, maybe dirt or some kind of strange liquid. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw that it was fogged, but not just steamy, as if someone had touched it with dirty hands. That's when the fear really started to settle in me, like the place was swallowing me. I didn't know what was happening, but a feeling of dread came over me. The air was heavier, as if I were being enveloped by something invisible, something that didn't want me to be there. I decided to leave the bathroom as quickly as possible, but before I could take a step, I heard a sound coming from the direction of the entrance door. It was a low creaking sound, as if someone was dragging something across the floor. I looked quickly, but saw nothing except the cold, empty light of the gas station. My mind was on full alert. I went to the exit door, feeling the weight of each movement, fear building up inside me. But before I could open the door, I heard a faint, almost muffled laugh coming from somewhere behind me. I turned around instantly, but the only sound left was the steady hum of the radio. I was beginning to understand that this post wasn't just deserted, he was watching. Something was there, something that shouldn't be. The laughter was gone, but the impact of it stayed with me, stuck to my skin. I ran away, without looking back, and returned to the truck, feeling my heart racing. I needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. Between my fingers, the steering wheel felt hot, like it was burning my skin. I didn't look in the rearview mirror while driving. When I came around the last bend, I took a quick look out the window, and the gas station was still there, with the lights on, as if it was watching me leave. But something was different. I swear, I saw a shadow move in the gas station window, as if it was following me. I never told anyone this, and to this day I can't explain what happened that night. I left, but that post didn't disappear from my mind. I know what I saw, I know what I felt. And the worst thing is that, even after so much time, the feeling that something was wrong with that place never left me. Sometimes I still find myself looking at the deserted roads, looking for him, and wondering if he's still there, waiting for one more unwary person to enter. I have no answers, but one thing is certain, there is no place on the road that scares me as much as that ghost station. It was a hot, muggy night, and I was driving down a highway that seemed deserted, with no one else around. That road, which I knew well, was normally quiet, but that night there was something different in the air. The sound of the truck's engine and the headlight illuminating the empty road were the only noises I heard. I was starting to get tired and the feeling of loneliness was bothering me, as if something was about to happen. It was then that I saw her. A woman, standing on the side of the road, with her hair down and a simple but very dirty dress, as if she had been walking for hours. She was as still as the road itself, and for a moment I thought it was an illusion, or maybe someone needed help. The highway was too deserted for me to just ignore. So, I accelerated the truck towards him. I decided to stop. I knew that if it was a problem, I would help. But at the same time, a strange feeling tightened my chest, as if something wasn't right. She didn't look directly at me as I approached, but raised her hand slowly, asking for a ride. What surprised me was how calmly she made the gesture, as if she had been waiting for me for a long time. I decided to open the window and asked if she needed help, and she responded in a soft, almost inaudible voice, saying only, "Yes, take me away from here." I didn't think much and called her to come in, as she seemed very weak and there was no sign of immediate danger. She got into the truck without saying anything else, and I soon started driving again, trying not to think about the strange feeling that was bothering me. The woman was silent the entire time, just looking out the window, as if she was watching the road with a blank expression. I tried to start a conversation, but she just shook her head, without much reaction. The path was deserted and the atmosphere in the truck was becoming stuffy, as if the air inside it was thicker. After a while, I realized that the hours were passing quickly, but the woman didn't seem to get tired, as if she wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. And that was what bothered me most, the way she was so still, so silent, while I was becoming more and more restless. The road was still empty, no other cars or signs of life in sight. The radio was silent, and the only thing that could be heard was the constant sound of the engine and the wind passing through the open windows. I glanced at the woman every now and then, but something told me I shouldn't. There was something in her gaze that didn't make sense, as if she were there but at the same time somewhere else. Every time I looked at her, I felt a growing knot in my stomach, a feeling that I should have done something sooner, something I hadn't yet realized. Suddenly, she turned her head and looked at me for the first time since getting in the truck. His eyes were empty, as if there was nothing behind them. They weren't focused on me, or the road ahead, but rather something in the distance, as if she was looking at a place I couldn't see. It was then that fear really started to take hold of me. Something was wrong. Something very wrong. I tried to make one more attempt at conversation, but when I started talking, she simply looked at the road again, completely ignoring what I said. The silence in the truck became unbearable. A short time later, as the sky began to lighten with the first signs of dawn, I took a look at the next bench and realized that the woman was gone. The place was empty. There was no sign that she had moved, no trace of where she could have gone. I looked desperately in the rearview mirror, in the back seat, but nothing. I accelerated the truck, thinking that perhaps it had been a trick of my mind, a hallucination caused by tiredness, but the feeling that something was wrong did not leave me. I stopped the truck and went to the place where she had been, but I found nothing but a strange air, an emptiness that seemed to have swallowed the entire scene. I stood there, not knowing what to think. How could someone disappear out of nowhere in broad daylight? I tried to rationalize, trying to understand, but it didn't make sense. I knew what I had seen. And the worst thing is that there was no sign that the woman had gotten out of the truck normally, as if she weren't real. Fear still accompanied me the entire way back. I drove to the next gas station, but when I stopped and went to tell them what happened, no one seemed surprised. Nobody believed me. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. I don't know if she was a ghost, a hallucination, or something much worse, but one thing is certain. Since then, every time I'm on a deserted road, I find myself looking in the rearview mirror, hoping to see something I never want to see again. I couldn't sleep well that night. The image of the woman and the feeling that something wasn't right stayed with me, like a weight that didn't want to leave my head. I tried to continue with my routine, do my work, but every time I got on the road again, I felt that chill on the back of my neck, as if I were being watched. Every curve, every sign of light on the horizon, I expected to see that woman standing on the side of the road, waiting for me, as if it were inevitable. And the worst thing is that, even though I knew there was no logic to it, I couldn't stop looking for her. A few days later, I returned to the same stretch of road, thinking it might just be my mind playing tricks on me. I needed to know if I was going crazy, if I had really seen the woman or if it was just a hallucination caused by tiredness. The path was exactly as it had been the night before, quiet and lonely, and everything seemed normal. But then, when I passed a more isolated point, something made me break. A familiar sensation, a shiver that ran up my spine. I didn't know what to expect, but the feeling was unmistakable. I knew something was wrong. I parked the truck and got out, looking around. Everything was quiet, but a strange calm hung over the place. The moonlight illuminated the road, and everything seemed normal, until I saw her. She was there, standing once again, with the same disheveled hair and dirty dress. There was no sign of tiredness in her, nor of the long walk I had imagined. She was standing still, simply looking at me, not moving a muscle. I felt fear take over me again, but at the same time, I could no longer escape this feeling that this woman was part of something much bigger and much scarier than I could understand. I knew that if I called her, she would probably get in the truck again, but I also knew that it wouldn't do any good. The last thing I wanted was to see her again, or worse, for her to disappear again without explanation. I got in the truck and followed, as fast as I could, without looking back. The fear was unbearable. When I finally arrived at a busier gas station, I tried talking to other drivers, but none of them seemed to know anything. I no longer had the strength to talk about it. When I asked if anyone had ever seen anything strange on the road, everyone seemed to think I was exaggerating. I knew I wasn't. I was driving alone down a deserted country road in the middle of the night. There was no one else around, just the sound of the truck's engine and the dim lights of the headlight illuminating the empty road. It was one of those nights when tiredness starts to set in, and you start to think you're starting to see things where there aren't. The road was straight and endless, but still, something bothered me. The silence was almost palpable, and the smell of wet earth in the air left me with a strange feeling, as if something was about to happen. That's when I noticed the car. He appeared in my line of vision, coming out of nowhere. An old car, one of those models that looks like it came out of a 70s movie, with a metallic shine that stood out against the darkness. At first, I thought it was just a random car, maybe someone traveling on the same road. But then, I realized something was wrong. The car was following me. And it wasn't just that. He wasn't making any maneuvers, no signs of overtaking, just following me, always behind me. I tried to convince myself that it was just another driver, but the uncomfortable feeling didn't go away. I left the car behind, maintaining a constant speed, but it wouldn't let me. Every turn I made, he did the same, as if he were glued to the back of my truck. And that's when I noticed that the car was getting closer, much closer than it should have been, as if it was almost touching my truck. I don't know how to explain it properly, but I started to feel a growing fear, a feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't just the fact that he was there, but the way he was approaching, without changing direction, without accelerating or slowing down, as if he were a shadow. I reached an intersection and, on impulse, decided to stop. I knew the road ahead was more deserted, and maybe I was getting paranoid. When I stopped the truck and looked in the rearview mirror, the car was right behind me, now stopped too. But what made me freeze was the fact that there was no one in the driver's seat. The car was there, motionless, with the lights still on, but there was no one driving it. My stomach turned. I took a deep breath, trying to understand what was happening, but my mind was starting to go astray. I looked back at the car, trying to process what I was seeing. He was there, still, but there was no movement inside him. There was no one in the driver's seat or in the passenger's seat. The vehicle looked as if it had been abandoned in the middle of the road, but the lights continued to shine, and the engine made a low, constant sound, as if it were still running. That sound seemed so distant, so empty, but at the same time so present. The feeling of dread that came over me was instantaneous, and I didn't know what to do. I started to get impatient and, at the same time, more and more scared. I couldn't take my eyes off the car. How was that possible? The car was there, but there was no one driving it. I looked at the road ahead, at the shadows around me, and saw nothing but emptiness. I wanted to get out of there, I wanted to speed up and run away, but something was stopping me. It was as if I was being forced to stay there, trapped in this bizarre vision, as if the car was watching me, waiting for me to do something. That's when I noticed the car started moving again. Slowly, but without any sound of the engine revving or any visible movement that would indicate someone inside. He started approaching me again, slowly, as if he were chasing me, but without a logical explanation. I looked at the driver's seat and for a second, I swear I saw something. Something moving, like a shadow passing inside the car. My heart raced, and I couldn't breathe properly. I knew I needed to leave, but my hands were shaking so much that I couldn't reach the ignition key right away. Finally, with a tremendous effort, I pulled the truck from its position and accelerated without looking back. I sped up like never before, trying to escape the feeling that something was chasing me. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the car still there, now further away, but it continued to follow me. I didn't know what to do or where to go. The road seemed endless, and the feeling that I was no longer alone only increased. I didn't know if the car was still behind me or if it had already disappeared, but the fear was consuming me, and I could no longer think clearly. The feeling of being followed didn't leave me for a second. I didn't know if the car was still behind me or if it was just my mind, fueled by fear, creating a chase where there was nothing. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, the car seemed further away, but the feeling of dread was still there, lingering, like a weight on my chest. What scared me most was not the fact that the car was following me, but the fact that I couldn't understand how that was possible. How did he move? Who was driving it? Or was it, no one was? Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I arrived at a gas station. I stopped the truck, parked it and hurried out. My legs felt shaky, and my mind felt like a jumble of confused thoughts. I went to the counter, and the attendant, who was alone on the early shift, looked at me with an indifferent expression. I tried to tell him what happened, but it seemed so absurd that I didn't even believe what I was saying. The attendant, who didn't seem to pay much attention, just shook his head, as if he was used to stories like that. "You must be tired, friend," he said, as if I were just another crazy person on the road. I tried to relax, but I couldn't. When I left the station and looked at the road in front of me, the car was there. He was standing on the side of the road, as if he was waiting. The most disturbing thing of all was that this time I didn't see the lights on, I didn't see any movement. The car looked abandoned, but I knew it wasn't. I knew he was still there, somewhere, watching me. I was paralyzed, not knowing what to do, as if fear had paralyzed me. I got into the truck again, locked the doors and continued on the journey, but the feeling that something very wrong was happening never left me. That night was the longest of my life. I drove until dawn, and the car never showed up again. When I finally arrived in town, I could barely tell anyone what had happened. It seemed so surreal that I even doubted it. But the truth is, since that day, every time I see an old car on the road, a feeling of dread comes over me. I don't know what happened that night, and I don't know how to explain what I saw, but one thing is certain, something was there, following me. Something I would never, ever want to encounter again. It was a moonless night, the deserted road in front of me stretching into a black void. The darkness seemed to swallow everything around, and I could only hear the constant sound of the truck's engine cutting through the silence. There was nothing on the road, no cars in sight, nothing to interrupt the monotony of the journey. Fatigue was starting to weigh on my eyes, but there was still a long way to go until my destination. What I didn't know was that night, the road would hold something for me that I would never forget. It was then that I saw it. A light, small and strange, appeared ahead, floating in the air. It wasn't like a light from a lighthouse or an ordinary lamp. It was a soft, almost ethereal light that seemed to float over the road. It was not connected to any vehicle or any fixed point. It didn't seem natural. I slowed down, curious and suspicious, and started to approach it, but as the truck approached, the light simply disappeared, vanishing into thin air, as if it had never been there. I stopped the truck, looking out the window, but everything was quiet, as if nothing had happened. My stomach turned. Something about it wasn't right. I looked at the road in front of me, searching for any sign that the light might be something explainable, but nothing. The path was empty, without any movement. For a moment, the only thing that could be heard was the sound of the truck's engine breathing heavily. I looked around, trying to convince myself that it was just an illusion, some reflection or a glitch in my tired eyes. But the feeling that something was wrong began to grow inside me, a pressure in my chest that I couldn't relieve. I decided to continue the journey, but soon I noticed something that made me freeze. The presence in the truck began to intensify. It was as if the air was thicker, as if something was watching me. I looked in the rearview mirror, out the window, but I didn't see anything. I looked around, trying to rationalize what I was feeling, but the feeling wouldn't go away. The light I had seen was gone, but the feeling that there was something with me, inside the truck, didn't go away. It was as if something invisible was moving within the space, as if it was following me closely, pressing down on me, making me feel like I was no longer alone. I tried to ignore the fear, trying to focus on the road in front of me, but I couldn't. The feeling that there was something inside the truck, something I couldn't see, was eating at me. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw nothing, but the discomfort increased. The air inside the cabin felt heavy, as if it were being pushed by an invisible force. I started to sweat, even with the window open, and my heart was beating faster. I was alone, but the feeling of not being alone was uncontrollable. Something was there, I knew it, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Time seemed to drag by, and the road in front of me seemed longer and more endless. I accelerated the truck, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was approaching. The pressure was increasing, as if the truck itself was being surrounded by an invisible presence. I looked around, as if expecting to see something in the darkness, but everything was quiet. That's when I heard a sound, a light scratching, coming from the passenger seat. I froze. It was as if someone was moving there, as if an invisible presence was settling in beside me. The sound went away as quickly as it came, but the feeling that something was moving inside the truck didn't go away. The cabin was silent, but the fear continued to consume me. The presence seemed to intensify, as if it were closer to me now. I was looking at the dashboard, trying to maintain control of the truck, but I felt like I was being watched. The air was cold, as if a breeze was blowing, but the windows were closed. The discomfort was unbearable, and I knew I could no longer ignore it. There was something there, inside the truck, and it wasn't just my mind, it wasn't just tiredness. Something was happening. Desperate, I stopped the truck at a point further away from the road, quickly got out and looked around. There was no one, nothing. Just the silent, empty road before me. But the feeling that something was watching me never dissipated. I looked inside the truck, and everything seemed normal, but I knew what it felt like. I got back inside, started the engine and continued, but the pressure on me only increased. I didn't know what was happening, but I felt, with every fiber of my being, that I was no longer alone. And I knew that somehow that invisible presence was following me, was with me, and there was no escape. I kept driving, trying to stay calm, but I couldn't. The air inside the truck was increasingly heavy, and my anxiety only increased. With each passing kilometer, I felt as if something was moving with me, within space. The sound of the road, the sound of the engine, everything seemed muffled, as if I were in a separate world, disconnected from reality. I didn't know if I was imagining everything or if the presence was really there, but I knew something was watching me, following me. As I went around a small curve, something made me look at the passenger seat. I saw, for a second, the reflection of something. It wasn't a defined shape, but a distortion in the air, as if the space next to me was changing. My heart stopped for a moment. I quickly glanced in the rearview mirror, and what I saw made me speed up even more. The surrounding field seemed empty, but the reflection, it looked like someone was sitting on the bench next to me, a shadow, a presence that wasn't part of that place. I blinked, and the figure disappeared, but the fear remained. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was going crazy or if I was being followed by something I couldn't see but felt with every fiber of my being. The presence was there, surrounding me, and I couldn't do anything. The feeling of dread never left me, and the road seemed to never end. I looked ahead and saw a distant light, from a headlight, maybe from another truck, but it seemed so far away, as if it were in another world, in another place. I sped up even more, trying to reach that light, trying to get away from the feeling that something was watching me and following me. When I finally arrived at a gas station, the feeling of relief was almost immediate. The fear was still with me, but at least I was in a place with people, with life. I stopped the truck and got out, but when I looked inside the vehicle, I still felt the presence. I knew there was no one there, but it felt like something was waiting for me. I don't know what it was, or what happened that night, but one thing is certain: the feeling of being accompanied, of being watched, didn't leave me. And to this day, when I travel at night, especially on empty roads, I feel like something is still watching me. I was driving down an isolated road, in the middle of the night, with the sound of the truck's engine and headlights cutting through the darkness. The road seemed endless and, because it was so deserted, it gave the feeling that the world outside didn't exist. Just me, the truck and the emptiness. Fatigue was already taking over me, and I was starting to lose track of time. I needed to get there soon, but the clock seemed to deceive me, and the road just continued. There wasn't a car in sight, nothing but the sound of the wind hitting the open windows and the headlight illuminating only the closest part of the road. It was then that I saw it. A truck, stopped on the side of the road. It wasn't a modern truck like mine, but an old model, the kind you only see in old movies, with worn paint and yellowed, almost opaque headlight glass. The vehicle was completely stopped, as if it was waiting for someone. What caught my attention, besides the fact that it was an old-fashioned truck, was the way it was there, without any signs of life. No lights on, no driver in sight, and the road deserted all around. It was as if the truck was part of the scenery, but had no reason to be there anymore. I slowed down, curious and suspicious. Maybe it was a truck driver who had stopped to rest, but there was something strange in the air. The truck looked out of place. I looked in the rearview mirror, trying to understand what was happening, but the vision of that truck on the side of the road wouldn't leave my mind. I looked again and realized it was much closer than it should have been. What left me most disconcerted was that, when I looked to the side, I didn't see the truck in front of me. He was gone. I didn't understand what happened. I looked at the road around me, past the area where the truck had stopped, but there was nothing. There were no traces, no sign that anything had been there. My heart was pounding in my chest, confused, and I began to wonder if I had seen what I saw or if lack of sleep was starting to play tricks on me. I slowed the truck down, looking for any clue, anything that would explain this disappearance. Fear began to set in, but I tried to calm down, telling myself that it was probably just a hallucination caused by tiredness. Even so, the feeling that something wasn't right didn't leave me. I tried to move forward, speeding up the truck again, but fear was starting to build inside me. I couldn't get the image of the old truck parked there on the deserted road out of my head. The feeling that something wasn't right, that something didn't fit, consumed me. Each curve seemed longer, each shadow thicker, and the silence around me grew heavier and heavier. I looked in the rearview mirror, trying to find some sign that the truck had returned, but the road remained empty, with no other vehicle in sight. It was then that an even stranger feeling came over me. I started to hear a sound, low, almost like a rustling, coming from behind. I thought it was the wind, or the sound of the truck's engine, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more it grew, until it became a kind of thumping, as if something was hitting the truck bed. I turned around quickly, but didn't see anything. The sound continued, almost as if something was trying to get my attention, and as I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw movement. The old truck, or what was left of it, suddenly appeared, looming in my mirror like a shadow. It was there, right behind me, but this time it seemed to move on its own, floating down the road without me actually seeing it move. I accelerated the truck, trying to dispel the absurd idea that something supernatural was happening, but the vehicle continued behind me, getting closer and closer. I looked ahead, desperate to get to the next checkpoint or some brighter area, but the feeling that I was being followed, by something that had no explanation, left me paralyzed. When I finally arrived at the station, the truck disappeared again. I stopped the vehicle with shaking hands and ran out to the attendant. He seemed indifferent, as if nothing had happened, and this only added to my confusion. When I tried to tell him what I had seen, he looked at me like it was crazy talk, just telling me to rest and leave soon. I got back into the truck, my legs wobbly and my mind in a whirlwind. What happened on that road, that night? I don't know. I don't know what I saw, but the most disturbing thing is that the feeling that something was watching me, that the ghost truck was following me, never went away. I stayed there, standing at the station, for a long time, trying to understand what had happened. My mind was a mess, and I didn't know if I was going crazy or if I had actually witnessed something impossible. When I got back to the truck, I sat down on the bench, still shaking. The silence inside the vehicle was so thick that I could almost feel the pressure in my chest, as if the cabin was filled with something invisible. I looked in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the old truck, but nothing. Just the empty road and the reflection of my own face. But what happened on the road, what I saw, never left my mind. Every time I traveled those deserted roads, the fear returned. The feeling of being followed, that something was there, watching me, accompanying me, never left me. I was constantly looking in the rearview mirror, hoping to see that shadow, hoping that the ghost truck would reappear. I knew I was being paranoid, but the fear was still there, growing, nagging at every part of my being. Once, on a similar night, I passed the same road. I slowed the truck down in the area where the old truck had gone missing, but nothing happened. I saw nothing, just the road, deserted and silent. I don't know what I expected, if the truck would appear again or if I was just looking for an answer that didn't exist. What I knew was that, since that day, something inside me had changed. I no longer felt the same, as if a part of me had been lost on that dark road. And with each trip, each deserted road I took, the feeling that something was watching me never left me. Even without the ghost truck, something always seemed to be there, watching me. I don't know if I really saw him or if it was all a hallucination caused by tiredness, but one thing is certain, the fear, that feeling of being followed, of being watched, never disappeared. And I could never again look at a deserted road without thinking about the ghost truck that, for some reason, still seemed to be lurking around me.